Right.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. We'll give it a few more minutes. People are still coming online, so we're going to give it a few more minutes. But thank you so much for joining us this evening for this very special webinar.
Hi, all. Thank you for joining us and looking forward to speaking about what we know is a big fight that we're fighting amongst the grand, huge fight. This fight against BDS is something definitely of the moment that we're doing a real deep dive into.
I think one more minute and we'll get started. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerard Filitti. I'm an attorney and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, and for the last few years, I've been privileged to work alongside my co-panelists on the End Jew Hatred civil rights movement, because together with the legal system and with activist support, we can finally make some progress in social justice for the Jewish people. I'm joined tonight by Adar Rubin, who is our director of mobilization at End Jew Hatred, and by Michelle Addoot, who many of you know is the director of programming and strategy for End Jew Hatred. The goal tonight is to talk about BDS and to address some of the latest developments that we've been seeing around the country in this fight, but also to talk about ways to improve the messaging and strategy to something that is more effective than what we've seen so far. So the goal here tonight is by the end for you to be able to explain to anyone, your co-op, your union, your school board, your city council, what BDS spells. And it's a much older word than boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The word is racism. Let's start with what BDS is. It's a movement that claims to date itself back to 2005, when there was a call by over the signature of 170 Palestinian organizations, which asked people to do three things: to refuse Israeli goods, to divest from companies that do business with Israel, and to sever academic and cultural ties until certain demands are met. And while some of those demands read like policy differences, the big demand is the return of all Palestinian refugees to Israel, which means essentially the end of the Jewish majority in the one state that the Jewish people have. So that is a demand that can't be satisfied by conduct. And it shows you what BDS is really about. It's not about changing policy. It's not about politics. It's about ending the Jewish state. And this is something that the BDS co-founder said in his own words. He said that the return of refugees would end Israel's existence as a Jewish state. So policy here, BDS is not really about policy. It's not about changes in political objectives. The stated purpose of BDS is the national annihilation of the Jewish state. And that's very important because we need to treat this as what it is. This is an existential threat to Jewish identity. It's not about politics. It's not about discourse and debate. When people engage in BDS, they don't influence what Benjamin Netanyahu does. They're not influencing the state of Israel, but they are impacting Jewish people, both in Israel, but more importantly, in the diaspora. And BDS, although this movement by this name started in 2005, it's a far longer and older movement. What it started with was in 1945 when the Council of the Arab League declared a boycott. And the language that they used back then was Jewish products and manufactured goods shall be considered undesirable to the Arab countries. Note that this is Jewish products, not Israeli products. Israel didn't exist then. This boycott was started months before the state of Israel ever came into existence. So Jewish in one phrase, and then the same document tells Arab merchants to refuse Zionist products. This is the origin of the boycott. It's Jewish and Zionist. This started even before the state of Israel existed. So the people who wrote this boycott used these words interchangeably. And in doing so, they wrote a code because they were trying to hide what this was all about, which is blatant discrimination. Even before 1945, the boycott was something that had been done by the Nazis in April of 1933. That was the first coordinated act of the Nazi government was to boycott Jewish businesses. This was the brown shirts at the shop doors, the instructions on the glass, there was no code at all. It was just blatantly targeting Jews. And the boycott of Jews is the oldest tool that the organized anti-Semitism movement uses. It's cheaper to implement than a pogrom. It's more respectable than a mob of people breaking things. This is something that gets into under people's skins because it really sets the message. It tells people what they need to do, which is to boycott, to bar, to ban, to not allow Jews. So it really is targeted discrimination on its face against the Jewish people. So when people learn to say Zionist instead of Jews, that was just the latest iteration. BDS is just a continuation of the old boycott, the old hate targeting Jews. Where do we have that going on today? Well, let's see where it lands. We have the Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn, which voted to ban Israeli products. They had to change their own voting rules in order to make that happen, in order to pass that, to push that through. And it took something along the lines of 14 years of a sustained campaign by the BDS movement to get the co-op to boycott Israeli products. But this shows that this is a movement that is durable. It plans things and it implements things with time. But the net effect was not just the removal of products from a shelf. It's the message to Jewish co-op members, you don't belong here. We don't want you here. It's about the people, not the products. When you're looking at a store that refuses to sell Israeli goods, as a Jewish person connected with the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, you look at that and see a sign that says "No Jews welcome." You feel uncomfortable walking into that store. You feel uncomfortable shopping in that store. You feel excluded, and that is the effect of BDS. It's not about the products; it's about the effect it has on the people. And it's
Said
not
that
just
perfectly, Gerard. So I'm just gonna, interject here. You really just explained that in a nutshell. And I think the Park Slope Food Co-op is an amazing example of how things have now culminated because we've seen, and I'm sure a lot of you here have seen over the past bunch of years on college campuses, these BDS resolutions that the student governments are passing many times, I mean, not even many times, all the time, it's really just pointing to the campus climate and the student government climate that is, against Jews, against the Jewish community. But ultimately, the administration does not, heed the call of these BDS resolutions that have passed. Likely now, you've seen many of you, and if you're in our End Jew Hatred action items groups, which I hope you are, and if not, we'll drop the link for you all to join. But you've also seen now, over the past 3 years specifically, at city council meetings, city council resolutions. So the BDS, the movement is also infiltrating, the elected official arena now to pass these resolutions that are, completely racist and asking different cities to adopt various boycotts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many times with pressure from the community and from activists, they are not passing. But Gerard, I just wanted to interject because we're seeing it in, so many playing out in so many different arenas now that it's something we know that we need to fight, and coming at it from this lens of civil rights and that BDS is racism full stop is something I think that it's a way that we will get heard. And it's also a way that we can empower activists to take action, which we'll get to. Go ahead.
Beyond, and just to expand a little bit, Michelle, one of the big things that we tend to talk about when it comes to the BDS movement is its social impact, how it vocalizes the discrimination of an individual, not just Jews, but also non-Jews who may work for a Jewish enterprise, or not an enterprise, but a business, a company, or just anyone really with any connection to the state of Israel. So, it's a multi-faced effort to basically not just demonize the Jewish community, but other communities as a whole. And also another way that, from what I've seen and from what I've observed, from not just our experience, but just historically, is the fact that, the opposition tends to cry foul whenever their resolutions are defeated, citing free speech. But it's not really just a matter of free speech. The whole thing, to an extent, serves as discriminatory economic conduct, is what I would like to phrase it as, beyond just the social. So, when it comes to engaging lawmakers or city officials or universities for that matter, you want to frame these two big key components, highlighting the social impact and its economic impact as well. So, I just wanted to lay that out there, that the economic factor and social factor go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Well, Adar, the social factor, that really is what Gerard is hitting on. And, that it's personal. It's personal. Park Slope Food Co-op, a Jewish child feels not welcome walking in to those doors, which we held a protest outside of, and we know why they would feel uncomfortable because they know what boycotting products means. It's boycotting them as individuals. Likewise, on college campuses, now we've also seen on a few campuses, and very likely in the fall it's going to continue, the call for Hillel or Chabad or whatnot to be, I don't know if it's defunded, Gerard, or cut off from campus, but that is BDS. And that, I mean, imagine your child is a college student on one of those campuses. That's racist against them. That's why this touch of the personal twist is so important, because that really is what's going to speak to the other side. Gerard, we saw that that's what got under the skin at the Park Slope Food Co-op.
Yeah.
That's what got under their skin when they were called racists. That's what they sort of, couldn't handle and couldn't wrap, their minds around, even though that's really what it is.
Well, and a lot of this has to do with the strategies that we've been using for so many years. The answer has been, when there's a boycott, there's a boycott. Let's go and buy and support a product. Let's talk about the companies that are being harmed. Let's talk about the great goods that they put out there. But that's not an emotionally appealing argument. That's not a viscerally appealing argument to people who use victimhood to define their status. So you can't make it about the product. You have to make it about the people. Arguing about products hasn't solved anyone's civil rights. What solves for this issue is to talk about how it affects people. And that's the civil rights frame, because that's what this is. Civil rights law has a name for the exclusion that runs through code, through standard traits, through saying we will take everyone except for Zionists, or we will not hire people who keep the Sabbath. These are proxies for a class that's protected. It's proxy discrimination. So it really is a civil rights issue because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing code. So BDS is code for Jews not included, Jews excluded, Jews not allowed. The same as we had in the 1950s and 60s, no blacks. When you went into some restaurants in the South, that was discriminatory on its face. That transformed into, well, we don't want certain elements. We don't want, this is not the inner city, or we want diversity of cultural backgrounds. That's meant to exclude Jews and Chinese people, by the way, at Harvard. So there are different codes that are used, but all of them have the effect of being discriminatory. And that's really what the issue is. We have to focus on the effect it has on people, because when you're saying someone is harming a business, no one cares. When you're saying that this is a superior product, the only people who care are in marketing. Well, you have to make it about the people who are affected, the people, and not just the people whose livelihoods depend on the product, but by proxy, the people who are affected by that discrimination. The 5-year-old who doesn't really understand what Zionism is, but knows that he and his dad were kicked out of a coffee shop because his dad's a Zionist, or the congressman's daughter who's being denied service because Zionism. That's the effect that it has. It teaches a young child that they need to be afraid of a coffee shop, of a restaurant, of a store, of a co-op. And that is more viscerally appealing, making it about the people and the racism than making it about the products.
So, one thing, so two things actually that I want to highlight that's very, very important when touching on the social impact. So over 35 US states, I'm pretty sure the number is over 35 as of up to date, have anti-BDS laws in effect. For example, in the state of Michigan, back then, State Senator Jeremy Moss worked with, former Governor Rick Snyder to enact an anti-BDS law in the state of Michigan that was still codified and is still catered into effect. Now, in the United States, another thing that you have to look into that's also equally important are basic anti-discrimination laws centered on national origin. Almost every single state has these types of laws. It is so vital that you look into these when making your case, because when you're hitting on the social, you're highlighting the illegality of the BDS movement's goals, their ambitions, their selectiveness, their indiscriminate selectiveness. I know that's an interesting term, but when I say indiscriminate, Michelle started talking about Hillel being targeted next. We started seeing that this year, as a matter of fact, in several universities. But that's the end goal, cutting off ties, full erasure of Jewish life, Jewish culture. And yeah, that's like one of the biggest aspects when looking into BDS-related initiatives, countering BDS. You want to look at the illegality, especially when it comes to the state legislature. We were able to take this on, for example, in Maine, in the state house. I worked alongside the Jewish Community Relations Council over there and worked on model language to counter what was presented forth. And we were able to work with elected officials that vote on the fence, so to speak. And that's what makes state house and state senate related BDS resolutions the most interesting, because everybody is familiar with federal elected officials, how they're going to vote, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to identify whether, Haley Stevens, for example, is a Zionist versus Ro Khanna, who's an anti-Zionist in the state or in the federal house, the U.S. House. But the state level is much, much more important, because not everybody is familiar with their local representatives. And that is ideal. We want activists to directly engage these elected officials, to meet with them through us, to discuss and educate them about the issue of BDS. It could even be first-time elected officials that come in as well. Those are the most important. But it's always important that you're targeting the elected officials, not just the friendlies, but also the ones that are uneducated on these issues. One of my personal biggest success stories, this actually was like a little bit before I started with EJH, but the relationship carried as I, working through EJH. Congressman Shri Tenadar. In my last role, I actually met with him back when he was a state representative running for Congress for his very first term, and he was very, very unfamiliar with Israel and discrimination, BDS, like you name it. But he did co-sponsor an anti-Israel resolution in the state house. At the time, it was a different body, it was a different ecosystem, and he was just following marching orders. But he seemed genuinely invested. From there, I maintained a relationship with his staff, talked to them pretty frequently, as a matter of fact, and they're fighting for their life for their current race. But that's not the point. The point is, the moment Congressman Tenedar got to Congress, he immediately went on a Democratic delegation trip to Israel. From there, he began working closely with Jewish organizations, including the End Jew Hatred movement. He gave us an End Jew Hatred Day resolution, understanding that BDS is a form of discrimination. That's why things like End Jew Hatred Day exist. I know that's all the way down in April, but the point is he learned his lesson. He learned from his mistakes. He was educated. He was a guy who, despite positioning himself, the media falsely positioned him as anti-Israel when he was in the state house. He was really just a guy who was on the fence and didn't know enough. So that's why I say it is so vital that you educate your local elected officials and your state elected officials, not just Congress and US Senate. Go local, your city council members. We will help you activate your resources. We will provide resources, talking points, things that you need to go to these city council hearings.
Well, yeah, I think Adar, I think that's actually a great segue. Gerard, maybe now we should actually show the website dealing with BDS, because this is actually a great sort of launching pad for one part of that activism is engaging elected officials, but when you have the correct tools. So there's an awesome landing page. Gerard, if you could share the screen whenever you have a minute, that both touches on this whole BDS is racism concept, giving you both information and some assets and imagery, et cetera, to be able to then take that again with our support, everyone, totally with our support. We're here for you. We're here if there's a city council meeting coming up and you reach out to us, we will get signage over to you. We can get, shirts over to you. We can get, if you want to canvas your town and sticker and poster, we'll get that over to you. But this site, as you can see, this is on our endjewhatred.com website. And as you can see, obviously, look at this in more depth afterwards, but it's amazing backgrounds, which Gerard touched upon. Then with various graphics that, as I said, we can get posters over to, prepaid posters to, take out onto the streets if you want, if there's somewhere that you want to protest, going to City Hall, going
Michelle, sorry,
outside.
I don't mean
Yes,
to interrupt, Michelle, but we actually had that last week.
that's what I was just going to turn over to. If you want to explain last week, sort of seeing it in motion, I think that's a great way. So go ahead while Gerard's scrolling, you could
Sure.
explain what happened last week.
Sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Not at
Michelle.
all.
Yeah, so last week, in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Israel Sheba Medical Center, Israel Sheba Hospital. So the city of Boston has a partnership with, the state of Israel Sheba Medical Center on AI tech that's basically working to help save lives, in various different hospitals across the Boston region. Anti-Israel activists actually mobilized to protest against the Israeli consulate, calling for BDS. But we worked directly with Central Massachusetts and Somerville, Massachusetts activists, gave them the flyers, the talking points. We brought in a student activist as well out of Harvard, as a matter of fact, and we organized a counter demonstration with those visual graphics that you saw below on the website, highlighting the racism aspect. And there was pushback against the opposition. This is a very, very, very progressive town. in which it was taking place. And through there, we were actually able to see more community visibility. From there, we have activists that are going out, and even before the counter protest, they were going out plastering stickers across the community, across, streets, to create more visibility and awareness, because long story short, there is going to be a BDS referendum coming this fall within the Somerville City Council, as a matter of fact. And we're still waiting on a date. But even if it's not on the agenda, we encourage activists to come in and bring the issue forward to say, hey, this is unacceptable. They're going to try to do this. You need to put your foot down, highlight the social aspect of it, how it's discriminatory social conduct and economic conduct. And on top of that, there's ways that you can basically address it within the city council, by talking about the lay of the law within your respective state. We can do the legal research for you. Like I said, we can provide all the talking points necessary. But when it comes to city councils and state legislatures, we want to know these things in advance. But also on the city council level, don't be afraid to bring the issue up if there's chatter around it. Make it an agenda item to fight back against BDS, to have your city council take a position off the bat. So that's what I wanted to say.
And here's the reason why this is so important. Yes, there are laws. You've got anti-discrimination laws, which BDS fits under, because you are engaging in national origin discrimination. You are engaging against discrimination against Jews on the basis of their identity. You're using Zionist as code. You're using Israel as code for Jew. So yes, you have anti-discrimination law. You also have anti-BDS laws, as Adar mentioned, in something like 35 states.
A little over 35, yeah.
But there is a benefit and a drawback to anti-BDS law. The benefit is when you have conduct like Ben and Jerry's. Remember those clowns? They wanted to divest from Israel. And what ended up happening, because they are a subset of Unilever, which is based in New York, which has, we have BDS laws and an executive order by a former governor preventing BDS. The state of New York had to divest its pension fund from Unilever because it's illegal to engage in BDS. This is one of those anti-BDS law states, which is great. It forced Unilever to sell the occupied territories Ben and Jerry's to the good Israeli who was running it. So everyone's happy. They kept selling Ben and Jerry's, and Ben and Jerry were not at all happy. The problem is that state anti-BDS laws really target two things: government contracting and a certain monetary threshold. Texas, for example, is $100,000. So you're talking about laws that impact a business that does contracting with the state in an amount over, call it $100,000. That's great for Unilever. That's great for Ben and Jerry's because the law kicks in there. It's not so great for the local coffee shop that decides to boycott Jews, to engage in BDS, because more likely than not, that falls below the threshold. It has too few employees, and it doesn't do that state contracting for the law to kick in. So there's a lot that the state laws don't look at and they don't apply. And here's the important thing. The victory, the danger for BDS is not that it wins, it's that it's normalizing Jew hatred. Because when you have a BDS resolution, when you have any of these things being discussed, whether it's on a university campus, in a place of work, or in a town hall, you're bringing in language that says Israel is an apartheid state. Israel commits genocide. The guilt by association, all of the Jews in the world are responsible for certain evils. That's the language that's being normalized, and it's not being debated. It's being put forward as fact. So what this does is it indoctrinates the public. People get used to associating Israel commits genocide to something factual that even their town hall is discussing, even their city council is discussing, even their employer is discussing. So that normalizes the idea Israel bad, Jews collectively bad, and the world needs to take action. So even without a success, because a lot of these can be blocked by law, but even without a legal success, That's the real danger of BDS because it normalizes anti-Jewish sentiment. You are attributing to Jews and you're putting that language out there in a factual form, not subject to discussion, not subject to debate, that just makes it far worse because it normalizes the association, genocide, apartheid, all the bad things that Israel is accused of becomes the collective responsibility of Jews. So that's the real problem with BDS. It's not even that they're successful, but what they are doing is they're using this language to indoctrinate, to work its way into the public, to work its way into the mainstream, so that people, kids in school, who have no idea about any of these issues, they would have heard that Israel is an apartheid state which commits genocide just by virtue of it's being discussed at town hall, it's being discussed in the
Yep.
classroom, it's being discussed everywhere. So that's the real danger about BDS, and that's how it targets the people, because it really does get into that subliminal mindset of Jews
So
bad.
that's 100%, you're hitting the nail on the head, Gerard. And that again, you can use college campuses as a perfect example. As we said, administration is not going to, give in and cut contracts, et cetera, et cetera. But to those students that don't know any better, what are they hearing? They are hearing what you just said. Jews bad, Israel's bad, evil, evil, evil. That is what the true danger is. So when I'm saying yes, it just points to the campus climate, it's actually much more than that. So, you really just said that perfectly, which is even why, more importantly, this concept of BDS is racism and getting out ahead of all of this, saying you are racist if you support BDS is what is going to move the needle and really change sentiment before it seeps into, towns, councils, et cetera, et cetera.
And when you look at Somerville, it's also worth looking at the strategy that the other side is employing. Somerville was chosen for a reason. Massachusetts is a state that doesn't have an anti-BDS statute. Maine, Vermont, these are all states that don't have anti-BDS laws. They don't have strong provisions. This is why you're seeing this effort there. And they're going in at the town level where they're not going to run into statewide constraints. For example, a lot of states, including Massachusetts, have laws, and there is the supremacy of the U.S. Constitution and federal law that prevents a lot of these states from unilaterally engaging in policies that affect foreign policy, for example. States know this. So you're not going to see the anti-BD, the BDS resolution at the state level. At the local level, however, where they have less skin in the game, you're going to see it pressed. And in a state that doesn't have anti-BDS laws, this is where they take advantage. This is why you see this in states that don't have these protections. And before you even get to vote for BDS, you start with the resolution condemning the war. That's the first step because that gets their foot in the door. So in the last 2 years, and they were very smart about it, they started trying to do all these resolutions at towns across America condemning the war. And they'd phrase it in terms that made it seem more neutral than not, so that it would be more palatable. They weren't necessarily condemning the genocide in Gaza, although some people did try to advocate for that. They wanted to have we need to end the war. And in doing that, they were introducing the concept that Israel had to do something affirmative, that Israel was behaving in a way that it shouldn't behave. From there, you get to but it's committing genocide. So we need to do something about it. How do we punish? How do we stop the war? We engage in BDS. We adopt this resolution. We stop contracting with Jewish companies. We stop doing business with Israel. We divest money from Caterpillar and other companies in the United States that support the genocide apartheid machine. So this is really thought out strategically, starting from these resolutions to end the war and condemn the war. Now it's moving on to let's implement BDS. So this really has to be where people are focusing their attention at the city level, at the town level, at the school level, because these are the ones where you have the least amount of legal pushback. It sounds aspirational. It can be made into a non-binding resolution at the town level or even at the school level. Non-binding means just that. It has no legal effect. It's not illegal. But what it does, it normalizes the language. It normalizes the idea. It normalizes collective blame of Jews. It normalizes Jew hatred. So this is why the approach is you have to be active at the local level. And you can't just go in there saying Israel good. You have to go in there calling this out for what it is. It's racism.
Yeah, absolutely. There was, another example is just last week in St. Paul, Minnesota. Similar situation with the Water Commission. There was an Israeli security firm that was contracted with them, and the other side was relentless coming out to cut ties. But there's an amazing group of activists there. Again, we offered our support. They came out there strong. They prepared speeches. I think that it was about 3 hours of testimony, and ultimately we prevailed. I think it was a vote of 6-1, but supposedly, the other side was relentless. There needed to be security, et cetera, et cetera. So it gets ugly. It gets ugly, but with this whole racist angle and racism angle, we are onto something, and it's something that will definitely get under the skin of the other side, without a doubt.
And why we're onto something with this language is look at where this is being done. It's being done in states that don't have BDS laws, and more importantly, it's being done in cities that lean progressive. Somerville has Tufts. You've got the area of UMass Amherst not too far away. The cities that do this are the ones that are used or steeped in progressive tradition. And it is much more appealing for them to pass this because they make it a social justice issue. So you can't fight back by talking about products. You can't fight back by saying Israel good. You have to fight back at the social justice level and make them feel uncomfortable. And calling them out as racists sure as hell makes them feel uncomfortable. Because while someone, an ordinary American, Jewish, not Jewish, whatever, who doesn't really know the issue, they may not feel bad about voting for something that says we're not going to do business with haters, but they will feel uncomfortable if they're being confronted with being racist for supporting something. So that's why this is key language, because where we're seeing this most, where this is being pushed the most, are areas that are progressive. And where areas that are more progressive, the successful language is the civil rights, social justice language. It's not the factual arguments. It's not the economic argument. Sometimes it isn't even a legal argument, but it is about that racism. It is about that discrimination. It's about Jew hatred. And calling that out for what it is, making it clear that Zionist is code for Jew. Israel is code for Jews. So when you're talking about engaging in a boycott of Israel, which was really started by people who were boycotting Jews before Israel even existed, that's all that is. It's code. And when you discriminate in code, that still makes you a racist. You're no less a racist because you're saying, let's discriminate against Israel, or let's discriminate against Zionists. That's the whole point. So you want to make people feel uncomfortable. You have to take the fight to them. And it's not a logical argument about the product. It has to be about the people it affects.
Absolutely. So just for everyone on to know, I dropped into the chat box the link to the area on our website, but obviously, if anyone's not familiar with our website, you should actually scan our whole website to see what we're working on. But links to the landing page for the BDS issue. And then along with, as you can see what I wrote, basically, we're here for all of you. I think many of you that are on, if you don't know, our biggest phrase essentially is that everyone is an activist. And what we're here to bolster your activism. We're here to help you, to hold your hand. If, you've never been protesting out on the streets, we'll help you get there. If you've never gotten up at a city council meeting and given a speech for a minute about something, we'll help you with that. That's what we're here for. We're here to offer all the support we can with the strategy behind it, to ensure that we really move that needle. So for sure, take a look at the page. I'm also going to be dropping a link to our WhatsApp action items groups, because that's really the segue into finding out information about everything Andrew Hatred is working on. If there's, protests, rallies, city hall meetings, etc., I'm going to drop that in here. It's admin only, no chatter. Many of you might already be in it, obviously, but if not, it's just, throughout the day, you're going to get very important info how you can take part in specific campaigns. And now, Gerard, Adar, should we open this up to some questions if people have?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm just going to be dropping the WhatsApp chat into, but go ahead if
I'm
anyone wants.
also going to be putting in my email too for those who have additional inquiries regarding BDS that's happening in your state, on your university. I know it's still the summertime, but anything that you've been hearing word of mouth, or anything that's documented, we want to hear it. So I'm putting my email out as well.
I mean, and guys, this could be something as simple as we can get you 100 small square BDS is racism stickers. If you know that something is occurring in your area, we can get you stickers just like the other side plasters things all over, slap stickers over what they put up. And even that will get people thinking and get people seeing sort of, over and over BDS is racism, and get people talking. So it could be as micro as that or as macro as, working on much larger initiatives together.
Let's see. Should we answer? There's one from Mark Weller. Mark, can you hear us?
Maybe he could type it into the chat box. Are there issues with the audio?
Uh, Here, it's done in webinar format. Here, I'm gonna message Mark. Oh, apparently the chat is disabled.
Oh,
Well, that's an oops on our end, and we apologize for that. But we are available to take your questions by email as well. So feel free to reach out to us with that, and we will do our best to get back to you.
oh wow. I didn't. Okay. And Gerard, there's no way we could do that us as panelists, no?
I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing any. 5 years of Zoom later, I don't think I've learned it any better, but I'm not seeing any options that give me that control.
Okay. So if that's the case, then exactly email, or for anyone in our action items groups, my phone number, you can also DM me, text me. No, I think Adar, I think you wrote, can you type yeah, I guess it must be disabled.
Yeah, I tried a direct message to Mark.
Sorry about that.
At the end of the day, I think that what would be a good objective for everyone to do is to take up that position. BDS is racism. Make that argument, make that case, plaster that sticker that make it painful, make it make the public associate BDS with something bad. It's a bad word. It's a racist word. So I think that's the very first step in fighting this battle. Beyond that, we can be proactive and aggressive as well. The same way that they put forward resolutions condemning genocide or condemning Israel, or whatever, we can be putting forward resolutions to condemn Islamic apartheid. We can be condemning Islamist extremism. We can be condemning the things that we're seeing in the United States and around the world, the mistreatment of people as well. That I think is a next step. It's taking the fight to them. But the most important, the most crucial first step is to recognize that this is a civil rights and social justice issue that's won or lost on making people feel the pain of being racist. It's not about the products. It's not about supporting the economy. Ultimately, it's about the effect it has. And when you feel uncomfortable going into a store or shopping, when you feel excluded because you're Jewish, and they're using words that are code for Jewish, that's racism, and that is what we need to combat at the very basic level. So
So
that
I got a question that actually was just emailed to me from Greg Pitts. One pushback I expect is, quote, but Jews aren't a race, end of quote. How would you counter that?
Jews are an ethno-religious group that are unique in the world. It's not just a religion, it's an ethnicity. It's a protected status. And by the way, the US legal system, the courts have said that Jewish is race in some cases. So this is not an argument that's without legal merit. Now, whether you want to go down that line or not, if they start saying, but Jewish is not a race, you've already made a difference. You've already taken the fight to them. They're feeling the racism allegation and they feel the need to defend it. So good job, because you've already started changing the narrative from Israel is an apartheid state committing genocide to are they a racist or are they not a racist? You've put them on the defensive. So I think that's a very good first step.
Oh, I got another question that was just emailed to me from Andrea Newman. Hi, Adar. A city in my area is secretly planning a divestment resolution. Multiple counselors are working with local activists. I found out by accident at a local festival tabling. The head of the federation in my area said he will do nothing to counter it because he said countering it will increase anti Semitism. I don't agree and think we'll have to go around this. I would like to hear your take. Please. Okay. Um, oh, okay. My apologies. Um, all right. So first and foremost, I need to know like which city this is specifically, which region. To the person who emailed this to me, can you attach that like to your body as well, to the email body, and then we got one from Lawrence Morrison. Hi, how do I get the BDS's racism stickers? Thank you. Lawrence, you already got my email, but just let me know. Let me see. You're based out of New York. Um,
Perfect. No, the easiest way, Adar, the easiest way for anybody that wants stickers sent to them, email me. I'll drop my email into here, michelle@endsjewhatred.com, your name, address, and I will get some out to you ASAP because I have them on me. So that's super simple. And then our one ask is when you do sticker, or also we could get you pre-printed flyers at a FedEx near you, prepaid and pre-printed flyers. So they're a little bigger. If there's, with a little bit more information or a QR code to our landing page, et cetera, et cetera. And if you plaster those around, get pictures. We could get that on social media. We have the power at our fingertips of socials. We have big reach to really start getting this campaign out there and start going on the offense here as opposed to the defense. That's what this is also about. We're being proactive instead of reactive. If we start putting posters up and stickers up in an area that maybe doesn't have a BDS vote up yet, but we know that this is something far reaching, not just in that specific town, we can really start getting word out of what BDS is. It's racism. Get people over to our landing page to read more about it. Start the conversations, et cetera, et cetera. So email me your address and that'll start, us being able to get you the actual physical information.
Michelle, we got something interesting that just came my way, as a matter of fact, from PSC CUNY. Hi, Dar. I attended your webinar tonight. Donna and I are president and vice president of CAFI, the CUNY Alliance for Inclusion. Our union, PSC CUNY, is considering another BDS vote this coming school year. We would love to work with you to help us respond. Yes, absolutely,
Absolutely.
David.
Absolutely. And for something like that, Adar, we can also speak to Yossi and see if we have a campus fellow at one of the CUNY schools. I believe we do, but I don't want to misspeak. So, to also work in coordination with with them, but 100%.
Yeah, I'm going to copy OC and ask him.
That's the important part, is being active and being part of the conversation. Because if we're silent, if we do nothing, if we say nothing, we're just letting the other side rule the narrative, and that narrative becomes Jew hatred. So at the very least, we need to be outspoken about this.
I got another question that just came my way from Mark Weller. How do you address this possible retort? It's not about Jews. We boycott Arab and Christian Israeli/Zionist businesses too. Um, well, I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier. Like BDS, despite its selective intention in demonizing the Jewish community, you know, yeah, I mean, by demonizing the Jewish community, you're also going after Christians and Muslims that work for various businesses that are ran by Jews or Israelis. So in a way, like, yes, like when we were talking about Park Slope, for example, there were lots of Muslims that worked for this, or not Park Slope. Which one was it, Michelle?
No, it was. Park Slope had, I think, 7 or 8
Muslim.
food brands that were boycotted. And within those, those vendors obviously have non-Jews working for them. This is also on the personal level, people level, greatly affecting them. So it far transcends product, and we've, spoken to a couple of the brand owners regarding, highlighting their stories and really ensuring that this becomes a much more personal feeling. As Gerard said, these people in these towns, in these cities, their visceral reaction is to feelings and, making sure that everybody is heard, et cetera, et cetera. So that speaks right to that point of, ensuring that we combat it on a personal level.
I got
Truly
an interesting
human.
question
And
that
let's not just one more thing. Let's not forget what the goal of BDS is. What the goal of all of this is. It's to de-Jewishify the Jewish state. So when you look at it from that perspective, they will go after anyone who stands in their way, including the ghost of Lindsey Graham, because it's about ending Israel as a Jewish state. And in order to achieve that, it doesn't matter who they target or who they affect or who they impact. The goal is anti-Jewish. The goal is not let's punish an Arab or a Christian. That's just a casualty in their battle. Their ultimate goal is Judenrein. It's without Jews. And so that is what we have to keep in mind as well. It's the context of this. And again, it predates the fancy code language of Zionist in Israel. It predates the existence of the state of Israel. This has always been code for targeting Jews.
we got an interesting question. How do we explain to non-Jews how Jews are behind this anti-Israel movement? And that's before that it says, how do we answer the question from a school committee member who is a potential ally? How do we explain to non-Jews how Jews are behind this anti-Israel movement? Well, I mean, you basically want to draw ideological comparisons with other faiths, meaning when people basically substitute their faith for partisan politics, so to speak, when the love of politics outweighs the love of religion. You want to emphasize that the ideology is not largely accepted by the mainstream Jewish community, how, Jewish Zionist organizations dramatically outnumber anti-Zionist organizations, I would say like 9-1, if anything. It's usually the same 2, 3 culprits, JVP, J Street, and if not now. So ideally, you want to talk about how, there's a lot of cases too where a lot of these actors within groups like JVP don't have a direct, connection to their Judaism. I remember there was this hilarious image that was going around from the encampments, as a matter of fact, from Columbia University, where they were doing a Passover Seder, and the Jewish Voice for Peace were writing in Hebrew, but not in the correct format, because in Hebrew it's right to left. In this case, they did it left to right. And also, they're people that are not in touch with the faith. They're more in touch with personal politics. Also, you have to assess like who are the ringleaders, and that becomes a whole nother thing. So it's an interesting question. It just depends on the
Of course.
region.
Listen, it's a very valid
It
question.
is a very good question.
And more than that, looking at Netherite Carta as well and other groups that are
Yeah.
fringe, I think it is useful to remember proportionality and to look at Christianity. In the U.S., what 3 to 4% of the U.S. is Methodist, 20+% is Catholic. Methodists don't believe that the Pope is the head of their church. That doesn't make their beliefs any less worthwhile for them. That doesn't make them any less Christian. But that does not mean that they impose their views on the larger group of Catholics or on anyone else. And within the Jewish community, same thing. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but when you have 80+% of Jews having a strong connection to Israel in some regard, that's what Zionism is, the connection to the indigenous homeland, the reconstitution of the Jewish state in the Jewish homeland. When the vast majority of Jews have that as an inherent part of their identity, yeah, okay, you can have some Jews who don't believe that, but they do not speak for the majority. They don't speak for anyone else. And here's the other point. Even if the numbers were inverse, we still want to protect everyone's right to worship as they see fit. So for as long as you have one Zionist out there on this planet, you can't discriminate against them either. So it's not really a numbers game. It's an understanding that you cannot impose your will or your worldview on everyone else.
Let's see. I've got another one. What happens? This is from Lev. What happens if the people who want to start BDS does not want to listen to you at all, no matter what you say? Well, they're not the audience that you're trying to convince or persuade. You want to be targeting, elected officials, council members that are either not well versed at all or, are on, 50-50 on the issue for that matter. A good way of looking at it is looking at their social media presence, see if they're very vocal on the issues, whether it's domestic or foreign affairs. I always say opposition research is everything. And these guys may not even be the opposition, so to speak. They could be your allies. But, in politics, I used to work within like campaigns and whatnot. But there's this term called opposition research where you basically dig and do research on your opponent. But in this case, we're not trying to target opponents. We're trying to target the whole body. In this case, every single city council member, seeing where they stand. That's why I was mentioning earlier that state legislatures are very, very, very important. How everybody and their mother knows where, U.S. House and U.S. Senate members stand on the issues because they're always on primetime cable, they're always online. We're more familiar with them, but no one knows about their local state representatives. So they're the most important demographic you need to be targeting. I would not, you're not trying to convince the authors of BDS to stand down because those people are so far down the rabbit hole that, you can't pull them up to save their lives. So if anything, focus on the people that are either on the fence or uneducated and curious to learn. When I say uneducated, I don't mean they're Team Free Palestine, therefore uneducated. I mean literally uneducated on, Israel and Gaza, on Jewish civil rights, things like that. So that's my 2 cents. Let's see. I've got one from Batia Levy. How do we answer the following argument? Well, BDS was successful in ending apartheid in South Africa. We are working to end apartheid in Israel, just like apartheid in South Africa was ended. I know there is an apartheid in Israel. How do I answer that?
Gerard, I want you to take this one because you just have a way of packaging things very succinctly, and I think in an
Well, look, first, I think putting into use my long ago degree in history, I think that the argument that a boycott brought down apartheid in South Africa is more myth than fact. Sure, it had a role, but there was a lot more that went into it, including uprisings within South Africa, than the boycott by the West. I think there was a financial bite, without a doubt. There was a debt crisis that was, I think, arguably impacted by a boycott movement, but at the same time as part of a global economic recession. So I think it's complicated, but I do think in balance, it's the myth of the boycott was effective in ending apartheid. It was other historical factors that did it in. And the other difference is when you're looking at South Africa and apartheid, the call was to end a system of oppression. It was not to end the state of South Africa. It was not to dissolve the state of South Africa. And so there was also a differentiation in goals. And at the end of the day, I think that the argument against the boycott, even against South African boycott, is that you are targeting individuals who do not control government policy. I don't know that. I mean, this dates back to my days, and the boycotts against South Africa were popular. But the same argument also holds that you're looking at impacting people who have no policy decisions within their realm of power. So ultimately, you're targeting people. Now, South Africa, again, different story because you're looking at a strictly political issue. You're not looking at no one is looking to end an ethno-religious state. No one is looking to end the identity or the dominance of people in their own ancestral homeland. So I think the differences there are ripe. But you also have to remember that you have to contest the fact that boycotting did anything significant to end apartheid in South Africa. It was the South African people themselves who fought hard to bring an end to that system of oppression there. And yes, it was great for people in the West to virtue signal that they were with the African people, but that's not what carried the day. It was the South Africans themselves.
That was great. Um, So, look, everyone, I think we're giving you a lot to digest here because it's a strategy that I think, many people haven't heard of before. So, we urge you to take a look, really, read the landing page, read about it, get in touch with us with any questions you have. And already I see a bunch of you requested stickers, which is great. We'll also be in touch with, if there is something coming up in your area. I know Adar already, heard from a couple of you that there are. Then we'll help you with a, greater strategy there. And, I just think this is right now, time is of the essence. And as we always say, it's go time. But with all of you, on here, we have people just nationwide and I know Canada, et cetera, that are all ready to fight this fight. And that's what is the most heartening part right here because we have everyone ready to do something, ready to get to work and combat this and more. And we need all hands on deck now. Gerard, Adar, anything else you want to add?
No, I mean,
We're good.
we have to be prepared going into the fall. I mean, from the academic standpoint, expect to see a lot of it. So, we're going into August right now. It's important that we're already spearheading student resolutions, that we're already forging relationships with new student organizations. So, for those who want to connect us to additional student organizations, we'll connect with our campus director as well, because we want to be prepared for when that moment comes. On top of that, going back to what I said earlier, even if it's not on the docket on your local city council, there's nothing wrong with addressing it, whether it's requesting time to speak, sending it as an agenda item, or even just coming to a city council with posters and signage that talks about the issue. So that way you prepare them in advance, because a lot of these BDS referendums and resolutions that we've seen take place on the municipal level didn't just happen out of the blue. They came from activists that would show up and would bring it to their attention when they're already talking about other pressing, more important matters. So it doesn't hurt to bring up the anti-BDS narrative, the BDS's racism narrative. Like I said, I have my email in the chat. It's adar@njuhatred.com. If you are aware of any upcoming resolution that's happening in your municipality, please, please, please reach out to us. We'll coordinate, we'll strategize, we'll even activate our partner organizations, work in collaboration. We'll do everything we can to ensure a streamlined victory. So please, please, please reach out to us.
I just wanted to add one thing in mind of that I'm reminded of when you were talking about the BDS as racism, the power of stickers and messaging. Years ago, I was involved in a political campaign by someone who was running for office first time. And even before they made that public announcement, they did a fantastic job of getting signs with just their name, not office, not what they were running for, nothing but their name into yards, their friends' yards, their relatives' yards, everyone who would have it. So by the time this person announced their candidacy, people had already seen the sign. People were already familiar with the name. They had that name recognition. Very smartly done, low cost, low effort, but it was already seeding the ground. So when you put up a BDS is racism sign in a town that is looking at BDS, you're countering that argument. You're making your statement and putting them on the defense. When you're putting it up in a city where it's not yet an issue, you're seeding the ground if it ever does become one. You're putting it in people's minds. They've read the sign. They may not know what it is. They may not think about it, but they sure as heck might remember it because it's shortened to the point. So if BDS ever raises its head, they have that sign that they've seen. It's in the back of their minds. You're associating BDS with a racist movement, with racism. So it bears being on the offense in terms of messaging. We don't want to be silent. We don't want to let the other side rule the narrative. We want to put the narrative out there. This is a civil rights issue. It's a social justice issue. Targeting Zionists, targeting Israel is really code for targeting Jews, and BDS is racism. Keep it simple, keep it repetitive, and make sure that the messaging gets out there.
Absolutely. So thank you all on that note. And hopefully we will have a recording of this available that will get out in all chat groups and mailers, et cetera, for anyone that missed it. And I think we're good to go, everybody. And thank you all for joining and giving us an hour of your time.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks all. Thanks, Adar.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Michelle. And good night, all.
Take care.